So hello everyone, in this video we are going to learn how to create a sword slash, and you could see how this looks. If I slow down time, look at the effect. And actually there are like lots of different ways to creating sword slash and lots of different technique. The one that I'm using is available with Unreal Engine's ribbon technique, like creating a ribbon based on like the animations and all that stuff. So let's quickly get started. The cool part about this stuff is that this sword slash effect is that I can simply just go and change my curve to something like different. Then if I choose that animation, let me pick up the sword. You could see now it looks a bit different. You could see the texture is same, but the lighting is different. So let's get started. I am going to use like low quality because my PC would basically just not be able to handle it if I do it this way. So a quick breakdown of what we are going to do. First thing is we are going to create the texture. Then we are going to create a blueprint for our sword. Then we will make sure that the sword can be picked up and it attaches to your character's hand. Then we will be creating a particle system so that it creates this sword trail. For that particle system, we will create a material with which we can control the color and some variations on that. In the end, we will do some blueprint for notify state so that the particle effect or the sword trail only shows in the particular state of our animation. Because if we don't do that, then the particle effect would be constantly enabled and we only want it to show when we are attacking, right? So we will do that. And one important thing I want you guys to know that I am using ribbon method, but to create a sword trail there are like lots of different methods. There are methods where they use mesh. Basically you would spawn that mesh and then have the texture move around and all that stuff. But for this one, which is like the easier one, we are going to use the ribbon method, and the ribbon shape is dependent on the animation that you are using. So let's get started and let's make it. Now first thing you need to do is you need to have this texture, right, which I will provide in description. But I actually have a video on how to create this sword trail texture, which goes in much more detail on how to use Photoshop and creating this texture. But right now I'm just going to do it quickly to show you guys, so that if you want to learn in much more detail, just follow that video. But I'll just do quickly right now. So I'm using 512 by 512 because it should be in power of 2. I'll make this black color and then I'll do like a new layer. I'm using Photopea, by the way. It's a duplicate of Photoshop, but it's free and works directly in your browser. And then let's just do a white color for this one. Then I'll create new layer, do clipping mask, and then use a 20%, and then just start painting some stuff like this. Again, I will be just doing it much more quicker for now. And the thing about using 20% is that right now it is this color, but if I do this one, then you could see we have some variation in the middle. So that way we get like different intensity. Then if I do 100 like this, and then kind of create some patchiness around here and there like this. And this small gradient pattern is actually important, okay? Because not important, but kind of creates a variation. And just a quick stuff, if you don't understand what black and white means, black basically means 0, like this. You could see 0, and white basically means 1. So whenever you go like say up and up, you could see the value is 0.5 right now. Here it's like 0.78, 0.25. So in the materials, if you are using, let's say, opacity, 1 is fully visible, 0 is invisible, right? So when you add a texture and whenever you add a texture on the opacity channel, wherever there is black spot, fully black, it would basically be like completely invisible, and wherever there is full white, it would be fully visible. But wherever there would be, let's say, 0.78, 0.89, something like, in this way, where it's like different values, you could see it's like 0.56, 0.60 and all that stuff, it will just create like different variations of the values in here. That way the texture has some variations. And once you have done this, What you need to do is you need to go into actually you need to kind of join it by doing Control E. I just duplicated it just as a backup, and then go into filter, blur, and then you could do any type of blur, but it needs to have some sort of shape. There are more options in Photoshop, so I'm just going to use motion blur because in Photopea this one works better, but in Photoshop you might have more options and you can play around with it. I'll do 50, and then I'll do last filter, and it will basically just keep repeating it. I'll do repeat it like few more times. There is some like hard edge around here which I could basically just, I don't know, like smudge tool, and then kinda this one, or maybe a blur. Okay, whatever. If you want, you could even do some more patches like this so that there's some more difference, like white color. Well, it should be inside this one so that there's some variations. Now, one thing that is important is that if you move around, you could see that it is actually bigger than our screen. If I do Control T, you could see it's bigger than our screen. So I'm just going to select all of it like this, and then do Control J so that it only copies whatever was inside, and that way we have something that is just like this. Okay. Now what this basically does is that if I create a new project, just to show you guys what we are going to do, if I let's say duplicate and copy it around here, this is actually our sword trail, and let's say our sword is this big, right? Just for the sake of this, I'll make it small. Just think this is the tip and this is the lower end of the blade, of sword blade. If I increase this size, you could see that how it starts getting stretching. You could see this is how it is stretching. So when there's a swipe, it basically stretches this texture over that area. So if I show you around here, you would see that the texture is just getting stretched. So this is what we are basically doing, and there are like multiple ways to create the sword texture, but basically this is the main concept, that is you stretch a texture over the area. And one quick way to check if it would look good or not is to first duplicate it so that we have a backup, because this is what we will be using. But in this one, you could basically just make it smaller and then do filter, distort, polar coordinates, and this would kind of give you an idea of how your sword trail would look. But it's good to first do a flip like this, only for the testing purposes, and do rectangular to polar. This way you can see how the sword slash would look. So if our sword tip was around here and the lower part was around here, this is how the sword slash would look. And you could even see one effect, that this one, which is the highest or the furthest one, is visible the furthest time, you could see, and whichever is like these points are like visible around here, around here, around here. So this way you can kind of get an idea of how this should look. If you want like a really thin one, then you could make this tip like around here and then add something around here like this simple stuff. So let's export and save it as a PNG, JPG, whatever you want. Now I've imported the texture in here. You could see the sword trail texture, but if I go into weave settings and say don't like draw border, you could see there's a one line around here, and that is probably because we have this set to repeat. So this texture basically is repeating constantly, like it's around here, then it's repeating. It repeats like every single direction. If you have watched my VFX guide, which is you could check this blog post or watch the video that is available. It goes in much more detail, but you should know that the textures actually repeat every single way, not just this direction but all of this direction. So that's why the texture which is around here is kind of repeating, and the way we can fix this is by going into down and search for axis styling, y-axis styling, and just say clamp. Clamp basically means that it will only be this size. So if you are trying to do some panning and all, it would not work. Okay, just keep that in mind. So if you make this to be clamp, then the texture would basically not repeat. So if you are moving your texture, let's say if you're panning your texture, it would not work. So based on what you're trying to do, you will need to choose the value. But for this method particularly, I'm using clamp. Now the next step I'm just going to do is create a sword, and basically the way I have done it is I store all that information in this sword. Okay, so if your character picks up this sword, then it would do the animation that is available in this sword. If it picks another sword, it will do that animation. Because lots of the tutorial online don't really do that. What they do is they already have a sword in the character's arms. So for example, this character already comes with a sword, but you can see that when I do play for me, I don't have a sword and I cannot do anything. But only if I pick and then do this, then only I start doing these animations. So lots of the tutorial online do show the previous one, which is having the sword already, but for me I'm doing this method. Okay, so first thing, I'm going to create the sword, which is blueprint actor tut sword, something like this. Let's add the sword. Instead of this, I will add a mesh, static mesh, and call this as sword mesh. You need to have a sword, what you call like sword available. For me, I have this one, which I downloaded from I don't even remember. I should probably remember, but I don't remember. I'll link it in description if I find it. One important thing that I want to actually show in every single video that I'm going to make, because I've watched so many tutorials and nobody actually told me about it. You could actually press anything and do Control E, and it will basically open their blueprint. If you click on landscape and do Control E, it will basically open the material. Like, that's so cool to me that nobody actually told me that if you do Control E, you can actually open like a blueprint or material or something like that. So again, this is TUT sword that I'm making. In here, I will create a box collision. So this box collision is just when your player collides, pick up the sword or something. I'm going to remove the collision from my sword. There's no need for me to add the collision, so no collision. Let's get the box collision and make it be up like this. I am going to make this default scene root for my collision, but I think it's up to you if you want to do that or not, because I'm just going to take this sword and attach it to the player. So I think it works better when doing that way, but try with both. If you were trying to do something different, then it would be different. Because of that, I need to go and then kind of reset the values like this and then play around with this stuff instead. Let me also make this be at bottom. Now what I want to do is I want to add a particle effect around here, which is going to be our sword slash. So for now, let's just keep it like this. I'll add the sword slash soon. And in the box collision, I'm simply just going to do is go down on being overlap. So when something overlaps, so once you add this, we can say that we can add a message called equip the weapon, but which weapon it is, we kind of need to make it, right? So in the previous one, I had actually done this. So let me explain how I did this. So in your tutorial, we will use an interface, which is a better way to do it instead of casting. I already have a video on interface and casting. It's called hard reference versus soft reference. Just a really good video that I think not many tutorials have made. So I'll just call it interface. Interface is nothing but a way to send a message to another component without having like a hard reference. We will go to blueprint interface and I'll call it BPI because blueprint interface, and do underscore and say equip, or let's do something like weapon, just do like BPI weapon or something, I don't know. And instead of this, we need to have something like equip weapon. So it's same as creating like an event, but instead we send a message without having like a reference to anything. So we created an interface and all it did was create a equip weapon interface. So this is, I've already created it once, so I'll do it once more. In the class setting in our character, okay, so whatever your character is, go to class setting and say that this one actually uses the BPI weapon like this. Once you compile, if you go to interfaces, you will get all that options, and one of it going to be equip weapon. I need to name it something different so that I know which one I just made. Here, TUT. You cannot drag it, you need to do right click, implement event. And what this basically means is that when this is called, this will run an event on this character. And the best part is, in our SWOT tutorial, we can basically say equip, let's search for equip weapon TUT message. You could see it says message. The thing about interface is that it can send a message to anything, but it needs to actually know who should I send the message to, and the message is going to be the other character. So the way this goes is that whenever something is overlapping this box collision, it will send that message. Let's say there's a cat in your game, and then the cat goes into this collision box. It tries to send the message equip weapon tutorial, but the cat's actor is going to be like, I don't have it, so I'm not going to do anything. But when a character goes there, it's going to be like, hey, I actually have an event because we added what you call interface in here. It will say that, hey, I have something that I could do. Let's see what I should do. So that way we are not creating hard reference. We are basically doing it like very dynamically. We don't even know who is our other actor. Okay. And you could even see in here, it says that message, this does nothing if the target does not implement the required interface. So if the target does not even have this interface, then it will basically just not send the message basically. But something that has the interface, it will basically do this effect, which is equip weapon tutorial. So I want to do is attach actor to component. Like I want to attach an actor to a component of my stuff. You could see components. So the component that I'm going to use is going to be my mesh, because that's the character, right? Mesh. So let's do parent, and then the target is going to be like what should be attached to this mesh. So before that, let's do like snap to target, like snap to target, snap to target. Scale, we don't want to. Scale should be based on the sword size, so we don't want to do that. But rotation and location should be snap to target so that it faces the right direction. Now, only if there was a way for us to get what should be attached. What if I could send the message that, hey, I want to attach myself. So in our interface, we can actually add an input called weapon or something like this. And this one would be the type of, you could do actor. And if you do actor, you would basically be able to attach anything. But if you do something like PPTUT sword, which we created, it will only be able to send the message of PPTUT sword. So it's your choice if you want to send like any actor, just not let's say not just sword. But if you add actor, then it would attach anything. If you add sword, then you would have to be sword or its subclasses basically. If you don't know what subclasses means or child means, you could do right click and create child blueprint. So everything that is added in here would be added to the child blueprint. That's why there's a good option that too. Now once I do compile, you would see that I got an option of weapon. So we can say that, hey, the weapon is going to be myself, self-reference, like this. Then in our blueprint interface, we are going to get the message that when the message is received, it will basically give the reference, and we can just add it around here. So what happens is when we collide with it, it basically sends the message to whatever is colliding that, hey, equip, and then this is the reference that I'm using, or this is what you should reference. If the other colliding actor does not have this event or this interface, it would just do nothing. If it has something, then it has to do it inside of this one. So it's being like, hey, then we'll basically get the weapon and then attach it. But now the problem is, let's see, let's first add it around here and let me show. Let's add it like this and let's do play. If I go there, you will see it is attached, but it's not at the right location. Definitely don't want a sword there. So there's an option in here called socket name. Where should you connect the sword? So in your tutorial, your mesh, whichever your character mesh is, go into your skeletal mesh, and then you would probably have bones in here. If you don't have bones or anything, maybe you're using like your own created character, you could basically add it yourself by doing plus. And I think I already have a bone, your weapon socket. So how do I find it quickly? Here, if I go down, you could see that I have connected a weapon socket to this part. So into this middle metacarpal, I don't know what that means, but I'll basically do add socket, and then I can just rename it to something like weapon tut socket. And then I don't know how it's going to look, right? So let's select our weapon socket, and we can actually do right click, add preview asset, and then search for a sword. So I just added the sword, and we can actually see how this looks. And then I can basically just play around with it to kinda match it to my hand like this. Okay, so this is how the sword would basically be. This direction, you could even add some rotation and all if you want, but this is basically how it would look. The only time this would look a bit different is if in your weapon, in this one, you actually did some rotations. Okay, if you did some rotations in here, then it would basically look different. I don't know if we can actually let's see. Let me like do remove all attached asset. Let me see if we can actually add blueprints. No, we cannot add blueprints. So again, kinda need to play around with it a bit. Okay, now if I go into my weapon socket, I can call it the same name which I forgot. So make sure everything is same, like capitalization and all, and then let's just add it like this. Now if I do play, run towards it, it's now connecting to my hand, but you could say it does not connect correctly because I have done like this sword mesh -67. I think my box collision is a bit messed up. I don't know why. Something is messed up. I don't know which issue that I did around here, which is kind of making it, you know, weird like this and all. So let's just keep it like this for now and see. And you could say it works if I don't do any like changes in around there. And you could see I can actually it follows the animation because it follows the socket, right? Now in my tutorial character, I actually have done some stuff. Basically I cannot explain this stuff because it would take more time, but this one is basically just a loop which creates a combo loop. Okay, so like animation loops. So again, you could see that when I do a left click, it checks if is the weapon equipped. If it is equipped, then it basically plays animation montages, which I have basically added it in this combo. You would see like first, second, third, fourth. This is free animations which are available in Paragon asset, and you have to retarget it to your characters. So just look into retargeting animations, and then once you retarget it to your mesh, whichever you're using, you would be able to use this as a animation montages. All I've simply done is I've added a array, animation montages array 1 2 3 4, and here you could see it basically does is that it gets the first one, which is at the 0 location. It plays this every time I click. Like if I click, it plays. Once you click, it basically turns the combo counter to +1. So plus means like +1. So 0 to 1. Then it basically checks, hey, is it the last one, which is like the fourth one? If it is last one, then reset the counter. So all it simply does is that it goes from 0 1 2 3. Then it's like, hey, it's not 4 is not available, so let's go above 0 1 2 3 4 like this every single time I click. It's very basic stuff. You could even try to follow this code. Again, not a good way to create what you call like a combo system. It's just a quick way to do it for testing purposes. So in my event weapon tutorial, I'm just going to make sure this is set to true. Like set this to true. You could even do it this way. Basically what this gives is that whether it was successful or not. So if this was successful, it will give true. If this was false, it would give false. Instead of just manually setting it up, you just have to create a new variable called weapon equipped like this with a boolean, and then whenever it is clicked, it basically checks, hey, is it picked up or not. This is not for this tutorial, so I'm not actually showing you guys, but you could see that now I'm able to do this combo because the tutorial is about, you know, creating VFX stuff. And one important stuff is that because this is made from Paragon asset, which is available like Quang asset or something, which I'll link below this animation, I didn't really have control. So right now this is how the animation is, right? And the sword basically turns a bit here and there because of how the hand animation is, or maybe the socket location, maybe I didn't choose right. Maybe I should choose like a better socket location for this one, but the sword kind of turns it a bit up and down like this based on the animation. So that would kind of create some difference. So let me first start making it, and then we will kind of start to understand it. In our project, let's create a Niagara system. Create an empty one and call it ns underscore sword trail tut. And in our sword, which is this pp tutorial sword, I will add the trail in here. Let's add Niagara particle system. The reason why it automatically added this because it was selected in here, but in case it didn't add it directly, then you need to go and select the one that you created, and I'll make sure to connect it to the sword so that it is connected to our sword. And let's make it be in the center. There are lots of tutorial which basically has like option of, you know, making a socket here, and then it will automatically calculate the distance in here, and that would be the what you call like the ribbon length. But for me, I just add like a basic one. Again, multiple ways to do stuff. This is what I've used. Let's select and add it around here. And now in our sword trail, which is Niagara system, we will add an emitter for that one. So let's add a minimal emitter and call it sword trail, something like this. It's a good way to create this emitter outside like this, like go into FX Niagara emitter and create a emitter around here, and then you could basically drag and drop it in here instead of creating everything inside the system. Because if you do it that way, then if you do it something like this way, you could basically drag and drop inside of this. And what that basically does is that you could create like a templates, so that like a base template, and then you could reuse it like in multiple stuff. That's the way I like to do, but for this video, so I'm just making it directly in the system. But just do it that way, okay? Create this effects in a different emitter, and then just drag it in here. First of all, we don't want sprite render, we want ribbon render. So let's add ribbon. We can delete our sprite renderer. Nothing's going to show, but for the sake of checking, we can add velocity. We don't want this right now, but for the sake of checking, we will add velocity. And then in the emitter update, we want to have spawn rate. So constantly spawn, let's say 50 particles or something. You could press F and it will basically take you to this part. Actually, I should reduce the duration. So let's do like 0.5. So it only lasts for 0.5 seconds. There we go. Just a quick way to hide it is hide the background. If you are using older version, then you will need to choose go into window and then do preview scene settings, and instead of this, basically just hide the environment and then make the environment color to be black. I've also disabled post processing, but that is just for the visual purposes, okay? This option would not be available in the older versions, like below 5.5. So just go in here and then do it manually. So what we are basically doing is we want our trail and which goes till top like this. So let's first go to initialize particle, and then let's do ribbon width, because we are using ribbon, right? And let's make it, I don't know, 5. That's too much. Let's do 100 centimeters, or I don't know, like 20. Yeah, 20, or like even less, like 10 centimeters. So we need to actually create a material that goes on here. So let's create a material, m underscore sword trail tut. Let's double click this. Let's select our shading model. So we have multiple shading models. This is also dependent on you, but usually you would be using unlit so that no other thing affects. So like other lights and all would not affect it. For the blend mode, I will use additive. So additive basically what it does is that it takes the pixels that you have and adds it to the background. So for example, if I show the background and then turn this to, let's say, additive, you would see nothing's going to be visible. But if I add a color by pressing 3, constant 3, you would see, because black basically means adding 0. If I add 0.5, you could see how it is like adding to the background. If I do white, it's adding 1 to the background. And obviously we can make it be more by doing 50, and then it's kind of what you call like emissive, right? So we can go over 50, or sorry, over 1, and this one would basically just do this. Also, post-processing is off, so it should be glowy. Right now it does not look glowy, but because I kept it off just for the testing. But usually when you do value over 1, it will start being glowy. Only for the nodes which can go above 1, like emissive color. So just know that whatever there is like black, it's just not going to be visible, because in additive it's not going to be visible. So if you want, you could use opaque if you want some black to be visible, but for me I don't, and usually additive is what we use for particle effects. I also want it to be visible on both sides, so let's do two-sided. Let's add our texture. Make sure the clamp is enabled. Okay, if you don't do that, then it will not work. Let's do RGB to here, and then let's select a plane, because this is how it's usually going to look. If you want to have it in the opacity, you could do this too, but for me, I am using a additive layer, right? So there's no reason to do this, but it's up to you if you want to use it or not. Let's go to our sword trail, and then in our ribbon renderer, let's choose our sword material. Sword TUT, there we go. And you could see how this is looking. It is basically stretching it up like this. So let's say if I increase the lifetime, or maybe if I increase the velocity to be 100, you could see how it stretches. 200, how it stretches. And you could see, right, how it stretches basically. So this is how our sword trail works, and this is how it would look. So let's just reduce the velocity a bit for now. And you can actually play around with UV0 settings to see which one works the best for you, like uniform scale, non-uniform scale. Tiled would not be good, because we have set it to wrap, right? So it's not going to tile at all. Now if I show you the sword, you could kind of see that we can actually see that trail, right? We can see how this trail looks, and the problem is it always faces us. So whenever you use Niagara system, the trail would always face you, or not trail, any particle would always face you. Let me just make it bigger, like 100, and then let's add velocity of 200, just so that we can see. Okay, you could see then. So what we need to do is we need to tell that, hey, you should always face this sword, because the animation changes, right? So let's say if I go in here, and then in our ribbon render, I say that, hey, you should be using custom side vector. Now here's one thing that we need to do. So in the particle spawn, not in the update, right? Just know that particle spawn happens when the particle is spawned, and update is every single frame that it exists in the world. We don't want to change the rotation constantly. We only want to change the rotation or the facing direction when it spawns. So in the initialized particle, we can actually go and set a what you call like facing vector. Make sure it is set to custom side vector. Okay, let's choose this and see if anything is even visible. Nothing's visible. What if I do 0, 1? So you could see if I turn that to 0, it works. If I do this to X, it would work. Is because our velocity should be, I think, in different direction. There. Let's see if I do 100. We can kind of see how it would look. And this is completely dependent on, you know, which direction I think this Niagara system is facing. But this is where it's facing, like X direction. So obviously in our trail, we want to apply the velocity in this one. So let's say if I do 200, this is how it would look. But here's the problem. You could see that if I rotate this, it's not going to show the right one, because right now we are adding like the velocity, or not just velocity, but this facing mode directly to the x-axis or z-axis, wherever it is, basically, or adding the velocity to the x-axis. But the thing is and that is because now the reason why it does not work when rotating is because we are facing the ribbon in a particular direction, but it is not same, right? It's not going to be always same when our sword is rotating and all. So what we need to do is we need to make a variable which basically our sword would constantly tell which orientation it is facing, and then we will constantly change this ribbon facing. So let's create a parameter. We have 3 values, right? And this is going to be a vector value. You could see if you hover, it says vector. So you could search for vector because 3 values are usually vector. And then I can call it, let's say, trail facing. Let's copy this text, trail facing, and let's just add this around here. Let's just add the trail facing around here. Let's just do, I guess, 001 as default. Again, doesn't really matter, but if it's visible in here, then maybe. But this trail facing we are going to constantly change in our sword, by our sword, like this. So let's do an event tick. So each frame I want to set a new parameter of our our Niagara system. To set Niagara variable, I want it to be vector 3. So every frame send this message which direction it should face. We should name it trail facing because we want to control this variable. So every time our sword is going to tell which direction it is facing, but we need to actually provide a value. So this value, we can simply just get our orientation. We could do self reference, and we can say that get our actor right vector. Should we right basically means, let me see. No, we want to do forward. So one thing you need to know that red means forward, Z means up, and then green means right. For me it's going to be forward, but for you it might be different. Get actor forward vector. If you want, you could even do for the sword mesh, okay? Instead of doing it for this one, do for the sword mesh if you want. But if you do it for the sword, then you will need to look for which direction it is facing. Again, play around with it. If it's confusing, just play around with it. And then let's add this. And for this to work, this velocity, and the thing is, we actually don't really want the velocity to control it. We just did it for the testing purposes. So let's do this. We can also remove the solve forces. It's your choice. Now let's do play. If you do this, we can simulate it, and then I can simply just drag it. So it seems that we actually provided wrong value. So let me go to this one. Let's do sword mesh instead. Let's do get a right vector. Let's see. Nope. Okay, so it's supposed to be up vector. Okay, my bad. I was being stupid, but I just did like sword mesh get up vector. If for your project, let's say if you were doing, let's say, forward vector, maybe for you forward vector works, but it is opposite, you could just type negate, and then it will turn to backward vector. If you do right, like get right vector, and then you do negate, then this would basically give you left vector. So in case it is weird for you, but for me it is up vector. If I do this now, it works, but you could see there's a slight gap between my sword and this text, like this effect. So in a trail, instead of using spawn rate, we will use spawn per frame. Spawn per frame, like this. And here I'll just say that do 10 if each between each frame do 10 spawn counts like this, and then this would basically just fix it a bit better. You could see. Let's try a different orientation. You could see it works nicely. So spawn per frame, it says experimental, but every other video that I've checked, it has always, people have always used this one because it works better, I think. Now in our trail, I will actually add something called particle relative time, this one. And if you hover on it to Control Alt, it will basically say that the particle relative time expression outputs a number between 0 to 1, representing a particle's age, with 0 being the birth and 1 being moment of death. So for us, it is lifetime of 0.5, right? So when it is at start, it will be 0, and at the end it will be 1. So when it starts, it's 0, the particle, okay, not for like emitter, because emitter spawns like 10 particles every frame. So each particle would have 0 at start and 1 at the end. As soon as it spawns, it is 0, and as it slowly starts using its lifetime, it will start to go towards 1. So 0, 0 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 till 1. Now what we can do it is we can actually do subtract. Now if you don't know about subtract, it's a pretty cool effect to create erosion. Again, if you watch this video, I go like so much in detail, and if I also created an alpha erosion video, okay? So what this basically does is that, you know how I said it is 0 to 1 in here? So here you could see that 0 is black, 1 is white, right? Which means that if whenever there is like white value, let's say 1, and I do minus 0.2, then that value turns to 0.8. If I do, let's say 1 minus 0.8, then it will basically turn to 0.2. So as we decrease the values, it starts to go towards black and black. And you know what the black means? It basically means that it will not be visible. So you could even add it in your opacity, or for me, I'm using additive, so it works for me. But you could see nothing showing because we just did minus 1. Minus 1 basically just makes it not visible at all, because then it would basically be 0, right? Because it will not be above 1. If I do 0.5, you see some of the texture is visible. If I do 0.1, you'd see it slowly is going to start getting lower and lower. So maybe if I add something like time and then do frac, this is just a way to test it, okay? Don't need to do this. But you could see this is how it will basically be going out, invisible basically. So if I connect this to the relative time, it goes 0 to 1, right? So as it goes 0 to 1, it will also start being eroded. So if I do play and then do this effect, you could see it slightly creates a erosion. Instead of getting smaller and smaller, it kind of creates some erosion kind of effect. And remember, our texture is not it's not same. So there is like black and white spots in here. Even though we cannot see it nicely with our eyes, there is some variation in here because we did some motion blur, and because of that, it creates a variation when it's hiding or getting removed basically. And again, all these red nodes are only available for, or are only used if you are using, let's say, a system, okay? If you want more control, you could even type dynamic parameter and then have a node in here, like parameter, add a node, and then you could have more controls with curves and all. But for that, just watch a Niagara system video, okay? That would be way too big for this video. Let's try doing it by playing with my character. You could see it now keeps showing this. If I do effect like this, if I slow down time, I guess you could see the effect. So here's one thing, we don't want it to work always, right? But before that, should I color it? Let's color it, okay? So in the new version, which is 5.6, you have this node called color ramp. If you are using 5.6 or below, if you are using 5.5 or below, please watch this video to do gradient mapping. So we are going to do gradient mapping basically we take a gradient and then apply it to our texture. We didn't had this node previously, which is weird because it's like very common node. But this is one thing that I want you guys to know, that make sure to watch this video if you want to use Curve and CurveAtlas. The thing about Curve and CurveAtlas is that it would allow you to use that same curve in different projects. For example, if I search for CurveAtlas, I could basically just go and search for the gradient, and then I can choose whichever gradient that I want. So maybe if you have like lots of different stuff that needs to be using the same colors, then create a curve and CurveAtlas like this one. You could think of it as a stored parameter or something, but for this video I'm going to use color ramp because I already created a video like this. I don't want to do it twice and show like different method. So to explain to you how this works, if I connect this directly, you could see how this is looking. If I turn this constant output to 0, which is this one, it is giving me the first value. If I do 1, it's going to give me black value, but it's not going to be visible. 0.5 is going to give us 0.5 value, which is in the center. But what we can actually do is we can actually give a values like this stuff into a color ramp, and it will basically try to match these values with this color ramp like this. So in our texture, we know that wherever there is black, it's going to be 0. So whatever color that I add to this color ramp at the 0, which is 0 to 1, right, it goes like this. So if whatever color I add it at the 0th location, it will turn to that color. If I turn this to white, so it goes 0 to 1. This is same as this one, okay, this texture. Because what we are currently doing is that wherever there is 0, we are doing black, wherever there is 1, we are doing white, and wherever there is 0.5, 0.6 and all these values. So if I create another point around here and maybe make this blue, you could see that wherever there is this value, which is, I don't know which value it is, it's probably 0.2 or something, it's going to be this color like this. If I go and add, let's say, a pink value in here, then from this much values would have this color. So let's say this is 0.3, then whatever it is in here, it will have 0.3. If this is 0.4, it would be around here. So we are basically just changing the color based on our color ramp. And I'm just going to make, I think, black at the end. So some weird colored effect that I've done around here. Now, if I go and play, it still would not look good, but it would kind of start showing the colors like this. You could see. So if I add a multiply at the end and then add it to the emissive, and let's do 50, it would look a bit better because it's now glowing with 50 intensity. If I show you what I've done in the previous one, this is the previous one that I had created, and in that one I had used a CurveAtlas, so I can simply just switch between colors like this. And then if I double click on this one, I can basically use the same gradient technique which I've used in the color ramp, but instead, because I've used an atlas, I can just reuse it again and again. And if I do any changes to here, it will do changes all over the area, like whichever material uses this curve, it would do it for that one. And you could see I've added a black spot like this in the center, so it creates like this pattern. So my PC did crash, and I don't know, with 5.6 it does crashes a lot when I'm using CurveAtlas. I don't have any clue why that happens. It used to work good, but if in your PC it works, just use it. I hope you guys understood what I was trying to do. Basically, if you want, you could let's say this green color turns to black like this, because I saw it's in the middle, and then you could kind of play around with it. It's completely dependent on what type of texture you're using and how you're using. But now there's one issue, that is if I play this, it is constantly playing, right? I don't want that. I want it to be showing only when I do left click. So here's what we are going to do. In your montages, so wherever you have this combo montages, so basically in your montage, maybe you have only one. If you want, you could have like multiple like this, the way I've created. But in your montage, go to it, and then we will create something called notify state. Not notify, but state. So if I do right click, you could see there's notify state and notify. For example, the way notify works is that you will need to create, let's say, two notifies. One would be like start the trail and one would be end the trail. So let's say if you do start trail, it will basically keep sending the message that, hey, keep doing the trail. For example, in here, you will have to do like notify begin and then name, and it would basically send the message that start the trail. And then when it if you create another one, then you will need to do on notify begin end the trail. So it's not on begin and on end, okay? It's on begin always if you use the first method. I'm not using that. I don't think it's a good way to do for the trail. So how can we do that? It's pretty easy. You actually need to create a blueprint for this. It's called a notify state. It's very basic. Don't get overwhelmed if you're creating this, this stuff. And there are like pre-made stuff, but I just want to do basic one, notify state, and I'll call it bp underscore sword tut, I don't know, notify, something like this. Now if you go to your montage like this, and here in the notifies, you could add a new notify track, and I'll call it as sword VFX tut, like this. Now in this track, I'll do add notify state, and you will find the one that you created, which is tut notify, and then you could basically drag it to where it starts and where it should end. So this way you don't need to create two notify, you just have to just add like start and trail, start and end basically. So just glide and check when you want the animation to start. So maybe I want the animation to start here, and then you could see how quickly it goes. So I will just copy the one that I created in the previously. So this is how long my notify state exists. Now the thing about this notify state is that you cannot add anything in here. You actually need to do it in the notify blueprint. It's very basic, so don't get confused, okay? In the functions, we have some of the stuff, so which is like receive notify begin. So when our notify is starting, we can run some command in here. When it ends, we can run some command in here, and we have tick. Tick basically is for every single frame until this lasts. So every single frame this animation lasts, it will constantly do something each frame. So let's learn one by one. So on notify begin, I want to send something. Now on notify begin, I can send a message to the one that it is owning. So by default, we already have a mesh component, because each of the mesh would have a, or each animated mesh would be a component, right? For example, this one. So it automatically gives us whichever component it is. I don't really know what these else are. So we can say that whichever the mesh component is, get its owner, not this one, get its owner, like this. So what this means is that this mesh's owner would basically be our character right now. So this mesh is owned by this this parent class character or this blueprint. So it will give us this blueprint around here. Okay. And the reason why we do this is it's very dynamic, you would say. It is dynamic. It's, you don't really know who the owner is, right? We are not saying that, hey, get the BP tutorial character. It's just saying that whichever this notify state is been used on, like this is used on, give me that owner. So it could be enemy, it could be anything else. It would basically give whichever it has been used. And what we could do is, if you want, you could do cast, but I really don't like doing casting because it's hard referencing. It's not good for the performance, and it's also not good for the integrity of your like your work or your project. So we can use interface again, and this time in this one PPI weapon, I can just add a function and call as, I don't know, like start VFX or start trail VFX, something like this. So in our character now, we would also have the option start trail VFX TUT, because we had already added around here, right? We have already added this PPI weapon to it, so we already automatically get this option in our character. So we could do is we could implement this event, and here we can basically say that start the VFX. But the problem is we don't really have the VFX or our Niagara particle in our character. It is actually in our weapon. And you know, when we get the equip weapon tutorial, when we are equipping the sword, we basically create a variable which we receive. For example, we receive it from here, like this self reference to this one, then we basically attach it to our player, and then it is equipped. What if I just do is I save this, so whatever it is, just give me like which weapon it is, like store this like this. Okay, so we are storing this somewhere, and then we can basically say that, hey, I want to start the VFX that is available in this TUT weapon. Let's get this. So whatever the weapon that is, which is going to be a TUT sword, we somehow need to disable this and enable this when we want. So we could do one thing is, when we start this TUT VFX, we can do another interface or another message, which is start trail VFX again, but this time we are sending it to the sword. So do you guys understand what I'm doing? We are basically checking our animation, and when this animation reaches this and starts, we are going to send the message to the owner, which is going to be the character, that hey, you should start the VFX. But the VFX does not exist on a character, it exists in a tutorial. So we are just getting the message and just forwarding it to the sword. But you could see we do not have anything in here. So let's just go into class setting and then make sure that this one actually it actually uses our weapon interface, and then we have start, right? So implement this, and then this Niagara sword tutorial, we will need to do is auto activate should be off. Let's add it around here and then do activate, and I'll also do reset so that it resets from the start. Now let's check it again. So in our montage, when animation reaches this, it checks this blueprint. It's like, hey, I received the notification begin, I need to get the owner, but I need to send the message something to the owner. The message is start VFX tutorial. So send the message. Let's do like start VFX tutorial. Now what is it called? Start trail VFX. Start trail VFX tutorial message. Okay, I want to send this to the target when the when this begins, and make sure to turn the return to be true. Basically when return true means like it stops, so it is stopping, I like the code is finished kind of stuff. So what this does is that whichever the mesh component is, it will get the owner and send the message start this stuff, which means that if you add this animation to a character which does not have this interface, it would just do nothing. And that's a good way, and that's why it's good to use interface. So again, animation reaches here, we send the message to the owner, start the VFX. The owner is our character. It's like, hey, I need to start the message, but I actually want to send it to the tutorial weapon which is available around here. It basically starts it. So let's do this and let's see, nothing's happening. You could see nothing's happening, but when the animation reaches, it starts doing that, but you could see it does not stop. Why? Because we only did start. In our notify tutorial, we can go and say notify end. So when it ends, we can just do the same stuff, which is this one, like copy this, add it around here like this, and then add it around here, mesh component like this. So on end we are sending the message, but this time we actually need to send a different message, that is stop, right? And there are multiple ways to do the same stuff. We could do a flip-flop kind of stuff. Maybe if you want, you can do a flip-flop, and then basically flip-flop basically does is this stuff. Okay, when the message is received, it will do this, and the second time the message is received, it will do this. So you could do activate, deactivate. I don't want to do it that way, so I'm going to go into my interface, add a boolean. I'm just going to turn this into a trail VFX tutorial and then call it as activate question mark like this. So now our trail VFX is like, should it activate or should it deactivate? So on begin we want to send activate, on end we want to send deactivate. So in our tutorial, if I do compile again, you would see that this one changes and has the option to activate or deactivate. This one also kind of messed up, so let's just remove it and then add it again. Trail VFX tutorial, like trail VFX. Then we can simply just do is connect it around here. So whatever the message is, if it's activate, it will send the activate. If it is deactivate, it will send the deactivate. So right now our character is receiving this, but in our sword, let's connect this again. So implement, not this one. So let's implement, and then here we can say that if we get the message that is activate, then activate. If it's false, then we deactivate. Okay, let's do deactivate. So let's do one last run through. When our animation runs, on notify begin, which is this one, and on notify end would be around here. On begin, we send the message to the owner, hey, do this stuff. This is activate. On end, we say do this stuff, but this time the activate is off. Who is the owner? Our character. Our character receives the message and basically simply just passes it through to the weapon. It does nothing, but it simply just passes it through to the weapon. The weapon is like, hey, I received the message. If it's true, I'm going to activate the trail. If it's false, I'm going to deactivate the trail. If I go in here, you could see it does play it once. Now the reason why it only plays it in the first animation is because I need to go and basically do it for each one of them. So I need to add this this blueprint everywhere. I only need to do blueprint. Okay, you don't need to do these steps again. You only need to add this blueprint. So let's quickly do that. So you could see I added this BP notify everywhere. You don't need to do it. You just need to add the notify this one, and it will automatically work for the animations. Even if you add new one, you could see the effect. Pretty cool, right? And if you want more changes, then make sure to add some more black spots in your trail. So right now, if I show you guys in this trail, if I use something else like different trail, because I have lots of them. Let's say I use the previous one. You could see how different it is. And obviously, if you want, you could increase the timeline. So if you increase the lifetime, it will stay for longer. So yeah, that's all you had to do, and that's how easy it is to make it. If it's confusing, please let me know. I'll try to create a better video in future if I'm speaking way too weirdly. So yeah, thanks for watching. Goodbye.